With that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Access to Justice Board annual report.
So it is just going to take me a moment. I'm going to promote the folks from the Access to Justice Board so that they can speak. Make sure I catch everybody. Okay. I think I got everyone. Diana, if you notice anyone is still in the attendee space that should be moved over, please let me know. So I think we have Esperanza Borboa and Michael Chin and Nicholas Larson.
Wonderful. Good
Terry
morning.
Price.
Welcome, everyone. We'll turn it over to you now.
Oh, and Terry Price. Yes, thank you. Of course, can't miss Terry.
Thank you very much, and good morning to the Board of Governors. I'm Terry Price, the chair of the Access to Justice Board, and good morning to Executive Director Nevitt. Based on President Abell's willingness to put himself out on behalf of my daytime employer, the University of Washington, I have put on my scarf in solidarity. So I appreciate your willingness to do that. And yes, it was a sad day for the Huskies. I'm very happy to be here today with my colleagues from the board. I see Chair-elect Esperanza Borboa. From the roll call, Mike Chin and Nick Larson are here. I don't know if there's...
I also just wanted to mention Mercedes is in the participant, so if you could move her over to the panel too, because she's on the board, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So our other colleague, Mercedes Riggs, we have a full, based on our recruiting and your approval and the Supreme Court's approval, we are back to a full complement of 10 board members, which we have not had for a while based on individual circumstances that have come up. I would be remiss if I did not mention the excellent staff that the Bar Association has provided us. We would not be able to do our work without Diana Singleton, who I see here, and Bonnie Sturkin, who is probably on the line, and I don't see her. Today, we wanted to talk about three things. The first is our work over the last year, centering community through board membership, culture, and the Community Advisory Board. And if I can, I'm going to turn this over to Esperanza Borboa to start this conversation. Oh, I see Bonnie.
Thank you, Terry. As you are all probably aware and have heard and probably are working within the BOG and some of your own organizations or institutions, the centering of community voices has been something that is a priority for the board. We've worked very hard to do outreach, the kind of outreach necessary to find those folks who are interested in participating as board members, going out into the communities, connecting with community-based organizations, connecting with volunteer lawyer programs, with other nonprofit legal entities around the state, and looking for folks who would be interested. It was I think, a very fruitful effort. We have a very diverse board. I think maybe even the most diverse that we've ever had, and a very engaged board, I should also say, because of the community involvement from our participants. Part of it was we wanted to make sure that the purpose of this board, Access to Justice, that we were holding ourselves accountable, and we can't hold ourselves accountable to ourselves. It has to be the community that holds us accountable for what it is that we say that we're doing, because we're talking about access to justice. So one of the areas that we've really been looking at is investing in communities with lived experience. This is something that is new, really. It's not something that most organizations or institutions have thought of. Usually when people think of it, volunteers or the community, they volunteer. They will be part of a group, a committee, consortium. They are asked to come in. They are people who are recognized out in the community, who are connected to, touched, have their finger on the pulse of what is happening in those communities and know what the underlying issues are and what the concerns are and what solutions the community is saying needs to happen. So these folks are very important to have in decision-making bodies and groups that are planning futures for, say, our legal system. And so, but compensating volunteers is with lived experience is something new. And I think there needs to be some more education, not for the community representatives, I think, but for others who are not part of that population, because there's I think maybe misinformation, misunderstanding of what that means. For example, the board. Everybody on the board is very active. It's a lot of work. We're very busy and we're very committed. We have board members who have other jobs and their jobs support them being on the board. So they are not losing any financial benefit from being on this board. However, if you are if you do not have a job, or you have the kind of work that is in the community that is either not paid, or you're receiving basically a stipend for doing the work because there's no funding, then you're contributing a lot more than somebody else who is getting paid. You are not being compensated in the same way. And that's not fair. That has been going on for way too long, way too long. And so we need to figure out how we can compensate folks for their time. All of you here are being compensated for your time, most of you. I don't know if there is somebody on here that is not being compensated for your time as you're participating, either through your employer or some other way. And so we want to look at what that means and how to find a policy, if you will, that will help us be fair and just, so that we have the voices that need to be on our board and not lose them. So we'll be asking for your help, your opinion, your suggestions, and your patience, and your open-mindedness and willing to be able to maybe learn a different way of looking at this issue. The other part that I'll talk on is our community advisory panel. The panel was created following the Supreme Court letter in 2020 that addressed the issue of the murder of George Floyd. And what is it that we're going to do? How are we going to respond? It's a crisis. And so the board decided that what we need to do is not put together another committee, not put together a consortium or a symposium or something like that, although that would be fine too. However, it's not going to address the fundamental issue of how do we bring the people on board who can help us solve a lot of the issues that exist within our justice system. And we decided that we needed to have community voices. We came up with the idea of a community advisory panel, did a lot of outreach statewide, and people applied. And from that, we selected 12 people. Might have been 11. I'm trying to remember. It was anyway. And we began coming together, and their role was to partner with the Access to Justice Board and look at what our mission and vision was, what our goals were, what's the work that needs to be done, what's missing, hold us accountable. And we think it has gone very well. The one thing I need to say is that this is also something where we're building the plane as we fly. And so we're learning as we go. We can't turn around and look at something else that has worked, that people have done, that has resulted in the end goal of having an integrated, authentic relationship with community and an organization where it's not kind of a token or temporary, but a long-term relationship. And during this time, we've had community advisory panel members help us out in the board with discussing a lot of different issues on our agendas and figuring out how we can center community, how we can center equity in our discussions. We've learned a lot in how well we do and where we're falling short. And they have helped us do that. They've also participated in the Racial Justice Consortium as representatives in that. They participated in helping find a new director for OCLA. They are going to be heavily involved in an effort that we will be launching this year, developing a strategic plan for the Access to Justice Board. We can't do that without them. We need their help and guidance in figuring out what is it that we need to do and how are we doing, what new things we need to do, and the different relationships that the board has across the state. So we're really looking forward to that. They're excited about it. We're also doing some recruitment. We had some great interest at the conference, people that signed up that wanted to participate. And so we'll be following up with those folks and building more of a stronger team. There have been people that have had to drop off for various reasons, and we understand that. Community folks are just pulled in so many different, especially if you're a leader within a community, it's very hard to stay on top of everything and be part of everything. You can't be everything to everyone. And so we're trying to figure out how to address that as well. Terry, is that good? Did I do too much?
No, that's perfect. That's
Okay.
perfect. Thank you, Esperanza, and welcome to our newest board member, Citlali Brezeño, who is, I believe here, there we are, who comes from Spokane. And so I know that Governor Adewale will be very happy that we have keeping our commitment to the eastern side of the state. I want to follow up with what Esperanza was talking about community. We made substantial efforts last year we restarted our ATJ board goes to outside of King County, outside of King and Pierce County. As you know, our conference was in Tacoma. And we went to North Central Washington, to Wenatchee, to hear from them. And then we also had an undocumented communities work group that was mostly focused on Yakima, and we got substantial input from them. And I want to give the Board of Governors two messages from those substantial efforts. From Wenatchee, they recognize, as you do with the STAR Committee, that they will not have attorneys to serve in those communities. You know that, they know that. They're closer to the problem in Wenatchee, and they had one statement for us: LRAP, Loan Repayment Assistance Program. If you want attorneys to go to those communities, you've got to put up money. And they know that the doctors that go to those communities have LRAP, and they want to be treated the same. So the first message to the Board of Governors is, if you want to solve this problem, the community is telling us, put up the money so that people can pay off their loans. You know their law school loans are, I'll use the word debilitating, crushing, debilitating, overwhelming. And so LRAP would make a huge difference. Also, what we heard from the undocumented communities work group in Yakima is they actually can't wait for lawyers. By the time they got lawyers, whatever legal services problem they had, they would either have to walk away from, like a bad housing situation, or or somehow give up their legal remedy. They cannot wait for lawyers. And for those of you who've been around a long time, you remember Paula Littlewood, who was the executive director. And what did she used to say all the time? We will not be able to out-lawyer our way out of the problem. And so I was heartened by President Abel saying that he had been to the community. He had been working on, I see a question from Governor Ahern that I'll get back to, community voices. But I think we need to think about other ways of helping the community get legal services. The work group was talking about legal advocates or legal navigators, I think was the word. And I think we need to think more constructively about ways to bring legal services. So to Governor LRAP, loan repayment assistance programs, roughly are, if you choose to work in a designated community, which is a low service community, or if you choose to work for a 501c3 organization, then you will get some percentage of your loan either repaid for you or written off. And I know that we do this with medical providers. We do this with teachers. Other industries or other learned professions have decided that this is important, and we should not be a profession that lags behind in this. I don't know if that answers your question. In terms of, I don't know if you meant like a certain amount of money. That I don't have. I mean, lots of money would be good, but I don't have a particular, dollar amount that I'm aiming for here. So that's what we're hearing from the community. Our plans are already in work for 2024, already in process. We are going to the peninsula. We are going to Port Angeles to meet with that community. This was something we had begun the groundwork for in 2020. We all know that all those plans went out the window. And so we are very excited once again to go on the road in April. I want to switch topics and just give you some notice about what's coming up. So we spent all of last year, we had a consultant and working on the hallmarks, the building blocks of the plan for the civil legal aid, civil legal service providers. So the hallmarks were developed. What do we think should be those core foundational thoughts or strategies or foci, right? For the civil legal aid services delivery. From that, we are starting to look at the state plan. The state plan is what all of the civil legal service providers review as sort of where are they going to put their focus and what is going to be most important for them. Race equity is the number one on the current state plan. Race equity is the number one focus of all of the civil legal aid providers, and it was a definite driver in the year-long process that we did to find a new executive director for the Office of Civil Legal Aid. From that, we are going to do a strategic planning process for the board of what is our vision and mission and what are our values. We, as Esperanza said, we see ourselves as the leaders in this for you and for the Supreme Court. We are the front of the ship, bringing these ideas to the Board of Governors and to the Supreme Court. And then lastly, I'll just say, when we met with the Supreme Court on October 25th, the Chief Justice was very clear that it is time for a new civil legal needs study in Washington. The study is 9 years old, 2015. Plus, we've had a pandemic and a recovery. It is absolutely time to start that process for a new civil legal needs study. And that involves gathering stakeholders, putting together the scope of the study, and then going back to the legislature in 2025 and asking for the money to fund the study. So, and given that it takes a 2-year timeline, we're going to be 10 years out at the earliest, which is I would argue 5 years too long. So this is definitely a priority for the Chief Justice. He definitely put this on our plate to work on so that we can start the wheels moving, and you will be hearing more about that. I think we left the final 10 minutes for a kind of roundtable discussion of what's the future look like and questions you might have about centering community.
Thank you, Terry. Questions, comments, or observations for any of our Access to Justice Board representatives?
I see Governor and President-elect Ann Jovell put her physical hand up.
So I saw Tom first. I'm going to go to Tom and then to Sunitha, please.
Actually, I will defer and let Sunitha go first because my question is more of a, hey, if no one else has questions, I have one. So
that's always helpful. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. We'll go to Sunitha and then to Tom.
Chair Price, thank you so much for your presentation. It really, and also for the entire board to be here and talk about what you've been doing. We at the DEI Council also struggle with how we involve community and involve the members who are affected by the legal profession. And so we recently changed our bylaws so that we can include public members, we can include judicial officers, retired attorneys, and we're hoping to expand in that way. How do you make the decision to go out to certain communities, and how do you reach them?
Esperanza, do you want to?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Just so that you know, my history has been working in the community organizing for over 50 years. I've been involved in the civil rights movement since I was a teenager, and I've never turned back. And so I have a lot of experience as a community person being approached by people who want our community to be involved. And as somebody who has evolved into someone who is working in these kinds of settings like this one here, with colleagues who care about justice. And so what's important is that you need to find out who's out there in the community. You need to find out who are the leaders, not that I think who are the leaders, but who does the community think are the leaders within their community? And to do that, you have to you have to go there. You can't ask them to come to you. You have to go there. They have events. There's organizations. It's work. You have to be willing to go to where they're at. If there's an event, could be a big community event, you go there and you start asking questions. Who do you go to when there's a problem in the community? And you keep asking that. And when you hear the same name, either an individual or an organization, go there. If you hear 4 or 5 names that keep getting repeated, go there. And you develop a relationship with them. But it takes work. You have to do that. If we try to go shortcut and just go down the list and start calling people because you saw an article in the paper, you saw them in the news, that's not good enough. I'm going to tell you, because sometimes communities will tell you, yeah, they're great at that, but that's not who we go to. That's not who we see. That's who the media sees as a leader, self-appointed leaders, right? So you got to be really careful or you shoot yourself in the foot and we lose credibility. So
Thank
there's some things that need to be done.
Thank you so much.
I absolutely agree with Esperanza, and I would just like to add, as a lawyer, so this has been I came on the board 6 years ago. This has been a process of development for me as a lawyer. You know, we have a specialized vocabulary, right? Even access to justice. What does justice mean, right? If you hear justice and you don't have legal training, what are you going to presume this is? And so we need to recognize that we speak in a language that is exclusive, and we need to change some of our language so that community members will feel welcome to a more inclusive language. Even words like plaintiff and defendant, right? And so this has been a evolution for me as well.
Thank you very much, Terry and Esperanza. Thank you, Sunitha, for that question. We're going to go on to Tom, followed by Kari. Tom.
My question is real simple, Terry. What do you want the Board of Governors to do this year? Or is there any action you want us to take? If there's, just tell us what you want. And I know it's all important stuff, but real simple. Golly gee, governors, I'd like you to do A, B, and C. Thank you very much.
I think it's going to be hard this year because it's a short legislative session. But if you were able to get the legislature to fund some kind of loan repayment assistance program, that would be something concrete that the Board of Governors could do.
And given that the short session has already started, it's a simple budget year, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I am going to take what you said as, golly gee, we really should work on making sure there's a proposal for the long session that actually has some meat on it. Would I be correct there?
You would be absolutely correct. And I would be remiss if I didn't include that the Board of Governors, what the Board of Governors could do this year is pass a policy about compensating community members who serve on our boards. So that is within the Board of Governors' control.
And your request there would be coming out of the WISBA bank account to pay for that?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that's how the policy is being written.
Okay.
Yes.
So I've got two. Is there a third, or is that, I mean, those are.
Oh, there should always be three, right? But I'll think about the third one.
Okay. Thank
World
you.
peace. World peace.
The third one is re-emphasizing the first two.
Got it.
Tom, thank you. Thank you, Terry. We're going to go to Kari and then on to Nam. Kari.
Good morning, Terry. Good to see you. I just wanted to let you know that, so I'm chair of the STAR committee, and that we are very cognizant of the loan repayment issues that are going on. As you probably know, governors and the bar itself cannot really take action on legislative policies unless it seemed to be germane to the practice of law. So the STAR committee, we do have a couple people who are part of it who are both with OCLA and OPD, and we have tasked them to try to come up with some policy that could be taken to the legislature that perhaps we could support in some way. But again, we can't necessarily do it ourselves. Also, one thing that we're looking at that has come up last year as well as this year, and I'd like to perhaps get more on track with it, is modifying the APR 6 rules to address the concerns that such people as Judge Pinnell in Yakima and other attorneys in that area have talked about, in order to get more attorneys in that area through the APR 6 program, since they've made it abundantly clear that many of the people, like students, who would be going to law school can't or won't for various reasons, and that's why they choose to do the APR 6 program. So obviously there's going to be other changes potentially down the road regarding how you become licensed to practice in the state of Washington. But at least in terms of what the STAR committee is looking at, that's things that we're definitely have on our radar and are trying to help fix. Maybe not immediately, but hopefully in the not so distant future.
Excellent. And I see that there's a comment from Nancy Hawkins in the chat about also strategy for getting repayment funding.
Thank you, Terry.
Oh, there you are. Thought you were
Thank you,
frozen.
Terry. There is a comment in the chat. It is from Nancy Hawkins. Would it be helpful to get legislative funding for the new civil needs study first, then use the study as the basis to try and get the repayment plan funding, a 3-year plan? So good question from Nancy. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
There are multiple ways to skin the onion. So,
all right,
Mr. President, can I add to that?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. I think it's a good question. However, the problem we have in small town and rural areas is not a civil legal aid problem alone. It's also the criminal justice system is also finding it difficult to have prosecutors and public defenders in those communities too. So it's not only issue, it cannot be tied together. I think we need to have a multifaceted approach. I agree though that the civil legal aid needs studies needs to be funded. I don't know. The last study we did, I think Ookla and LFW and others were able to get the funding for that. I don't know what ETJ board plan are for how to fund the next civil legal aid study. I'm sure they're going to be asking the bar to help out with that. But if it takes getting funding from legislators, that would be okay. But the bigger problem is this board needs to advance the issue about small town and rural areas before the governors and before the legislators at the next biennial year, which unfortunately is not this particular time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Francis. So let me continue on down the list. We're going to go to Nam, and then we're going to be followed by Michael Cherry. So I'll turn it over to Nam.
I'm following up on Governor Ahern and Terry's suggestion on legislation for the upcoming session. And it's a good thing that it's a short session now, actually, because if you wanted to start proposed legislation, you should start right now, especially since you need to find a dollar amount for the legislature to approve. I would suggest assigning this to a particular council or committee or group to spearhead the legislation so that we don't forget this after this meeting. I think maybe Diversity Council might be a good place to send it, STAR Committee. But I do think if you want legislation to be proposed for the upcoming biennium session, which is next January, you do it now. You start the work now. You start allotting and dividing the work needed to be done. So I would propose either we talk about that now or we schedule it for, are we meeting in March? Okay. Yes, I would propose putting it on the agenda for meeting in March to talk about proposed legislation that's suggested by Terry and Tom.
When does the short session end?
March
7th.
Yeah, but we're talking about legislation on for the upcoming biennium, which has to be proposed by September. You have to get legislation by
Get things in gear now.
Yeah, the deadline is actually September, not January 2025.
All right. Thank you very much, Nam. We'll move on to Michael Cherry, followed by Todd. Michael, if you are speaking, you may be on mute.
Michael doesn't appear to be muted. I wonder if there's a microphone selection issue.
You know what we'll do in the meantime, Michael, if you can hear me, go ahead and keep working on the technology issues. We will come back to you. Let's move on to Todd, and then we will circle back to Michael Cherry.
Yeah, I'm wondering what if types of information you're looking at that may have a countervailing effect to some of the things we're seeing here. I mean, I've heard a lot over the last several meetings, several months that I've been involved as a governor. And clearly, I'm not skeptical at all about the so-called legal deserts and the dearth of legal professionals in rural and small town areas and sparsely populated areas of the state. But I'm looking at right now a piece one day ago, analysis, and this is on Bloomberg Law, analysis, lawyers, legal employment closeout 2023 on a down note. The fourth quarter of 23 was unforgiving to the legal field with broad-based decreases in employment and increases in unemployment. Legal industry's negative numbers came despite otherwise rosy macroeconomics on inflation, jobs, and GDP growth. I'd also seen a publication by Georgetown Law Center on Ethics and Legal Profession reporting on the state of the legal market. It's been done several years. 2023 actually references 2022 figures, but they indicate that firms in particular saw their demand decline precipitously. That's in 2022. So clearly there's some messaging which I've heard boo from, nothing from anybody, any expert, any committee member, whatnot, volunteer member, whoever, referencing the tough sledding that some of our members who are already admitted to the profession may be seeing. And so, I mean, this kind of seems to me to be totally at odds with that. We're just kind of ignoring this, members who are slipping into extremis because of drying up of legal work. I think a lot of times we forget that the legal profession is a means of livelihood for individual lawyers, not just some amorphous monolith that we think is not big enough to address all the needs and demands out there. If these demands are truly there, then there should be economic incentive for individuals to go. There's a supply and demand in classic economics. I mean, we're lawyers. We think that doesn't apply to us. So I would just kind of invite commentary or thoughts on that subject matter. We could be cranking out 3 times as many lawyers, and then we have 3 times as many lawyers plus increasing unemployment among the pre-existing membership. So I just wonder if Chair Price or any of the committee members would be interested in addressing that. Thank you.
So I'm not familiar, obviously, with the articles that you referenced, but here's what I'll tell you from my position, not so much from the Access to Justice Board, but from my day job at the University of Washington Law School, where I'm a professor. So admissions are down, applications are down. So fewer people are wanting to go into the profession. As you were saying, it is, or the subtext of what you were saying, it's a client-driven profession. If the clients don't want to pay the money for lawyers, then there's going to be fewer jobs. But what we know about the law graduates is that and I'll just speak for our school, they don't want to go further than Bellevue. And they have substantial debts that they have incurred, that they need the salaries that they are paying in Seattle, King County in order to pay off their debts. If they had their druthers, I believe they would want to go further afield if they thought they could make it financially viable for them. So I think there are, and we know from our students who have gone and done internships in Eastern Washington that they have amazing opportunities that they don't have we're in a saturated legal market like Seattle, King County. This is not only true about lawyers, this is also true about physicians. This is true about psychiatrists, for instance. If you want a psychiatrist east of Bellevue, the potential for that is dramatically reduced because they are overly saturated in one county. So I would say there's a number of things that need to be addressed here.
All right. Thank you very much, Terry. Thank you, Todd, for the question. We're going to go back to Michael. Michael has put his question in the chat. I'm also going to give Michael Cherry the opportunity to weigh in and say anything further that you would like. He writes, thank you for your work and your report. The Practice of Law Board just translated some of its work on finding a lawyer into 2 languages, Spanish and Chinese. It seems most legal information at the bar and courts are only available in English. How important is it that we look at doing more translations for access to justice? If yes, what is the best way to do this? Draft in the language or translate from English to language? So, question from Michael. I'll turn it over to our ATG board representatives.
Would one of my colleagues from the board, I mean, this certainly came up in Wenatchee, would one of my other colleagues like to address this?
Hi, Terry. If you can hear me, I'm happy
Yes.
to respond to this. I think this issue is not just in the legal system, but is also, I work at the city of Seattle. We also have these same challenges of language access, not only just to the information, but is the information accessible, not just language-wise, but understandable. And so I think that this is something that I think is a really big issue. I think it came up also when we were in Wenatchee. It also came up as a question during our meeting with the Washington State Supreme Court around language access. So I think that this is a really important issue that we do look for resources. And I think that's the key thing is like what resources are available for translating information. But also I think it's one of those issues that I think that we need to start thinking about who's able to get information and what languages to translate this information. I think one of the things that one of the community organizations that we met in Wenatchee spoke about getting jury summons. It was sent out in English, and it was sent out to a family that their primary language that was spoken at home was Spanish. And one of the organizations said, hey, are we even able to translate this information? Because is that providing legal services by translating the information on the jury summons for someone to show up? So all of these sorts of issues are all really interrelated in terms of what access really looks like. And one thing that Terry did talk about access to justice is really how do we build in a legal system that is inclusive, that brings people in so that they can not only understand in the language they speak, but also, or they can understand, but also is it accessible in terms of plain language so people can really understand what their options are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chin. I also note that Michael Cherry wrote in the chat, that's our worry, is translation understandable and respectful. I did mention I was going to go to Michael Cherry to find out if his mute button issue has been resolved. Michael, is there anything further you wanted to say if your mute button issue has been fixed? He writes, thanks, I'm good. All right, thank you very much, Michael. So now I'm going to go to Nam, who I saw Nam had his hand raised. So Nam.
Oh, I think Terry already addressed my point about the difference, rural versus urban market.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Nam. Other questions, comments, or observations for our ATJ board representatives?
If there are none, can I have
I have one thing.
Oh,
I have one
there.
thing. Hi. We do have a third thing we would like the BOG to do, and that is to add a community member on the board. And we would be happy to help with that process. If you're not sure how to go about that, we know a lot of folks. We've done a lot of outreach. There's some amazing, amazing people out there in the community. So that it's extremely important that we put our money where our mouth is, right? And that we walk the talk and do it authentically. And so we appreciate everything the BOG has done to support the work of the ATJ board and to support the work of communities. And this would be a huge step in that direction. So I would definitely encourage the board to do that. Thank you.
If I can just ask one follow-up on your request.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just so I make sure I understand, and I wrote this down as number 3. By a community member, you mean someone who's not a lawyer, but like a normal person?
A civilian. A civilian.
A normal person. I see you as a normal person. Yes, a normal person, if that's what you want to call them. Yes.
Yes.
Great question. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Esperanza and Terry. Other questions or comments for any of our panelists? Okay. Well, before letting.
So
Yes.
then, if I could just take 30 more
Of
seconds.
course. Yeah.
So this is the end of my time on the board, and my at the end of September. This is the beginning of April will be the end of my time as chair. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the honor of serving on the Access to Justice Board. We may meet again at some breakfast in the future, but if we don't, it has been a personal honor to do this work for 6 years. I'm getting a little more choked up than I thought. And again, a huge thank you to the board members and to Diana Singleton and Bonnie Sturken, who make it all happen. So thank you all.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Terry. Let me ask for a round of applause for Terry and his service.
Thank you.
Terry, I want to thank you. I want to thank Esperanza. I also want to thank Ms. Sitlali, Mr. Chin, Mr. Larson, and Ms. Riggs for being here today. As I've said many times before, my perspective is that access to justice is the flip side of rule of law. What you do is invaluable, and I thank you for it. So let's go ahead and with that will wrap up this portion of our presentations. And that moves us on, I believe, Executive Director Nevitt, to a scheduled break. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have the opportunity to take a break. I believe that our next presenter is here. But yes, we do have but we are ahead of schedule, so we can take a break.
Well, let's go ahead and do this. We've been going over an hour. I typically try to observe like deposition rules. We've been going over an hour. Let's go ahead and take a break. We'll come back in, let's say 7 minutes. That'd be 10:25.